Hello, I'm Tom Sanders with the BBC News. The Texas Senator Ted Cruz has won the Iowa caucus for the Republican Party nomination, the first public vote in the race for the US presidency. He beat the favourite Donald Trump into second place. Senator Marco Rubio from Florida was third. The former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton appears to have won the narrowest of victories in the Democratic contest. Here's John Sopel.
The Donald Trump bandwagon hasn't come to a halt, but he has underperformed badly, and failure wasn't something he'd contemplated. The Conservative Senator Ted Cruz exceeded expectations in winning, and that gives him momentum going into New Hampshire. But strange as it may sound, perhaps the most significant result is Senator Marco Rubio. Not only did he do way better than expected, he is now without doubt the preeminent establishment candidate. On the Democratic Party side, it looks as though Hillary Clinton might have won, but by a squeak, only just beating her left-wing rival, Senator Bernie Sanders. The race for the Democratic nomination still has a long way to run.
King Abdullah of Jordan has told the BBC that his country has reached saturation point in its ability to take in and care for Syrian refugees. Speaking ahead of an international donors conference in London on Thursday, King Abdullah said Jordan couldn't continue to accept refugees unless it received more support.
Jordanians are suffering from trying to find jobs. It has hurt us when it comes to the educational system, our healthcare. Sooner or later, I think the dam is going to burst, and I think this week is going to be very important for Jordanians to see is there going to be help not only for Syrian refugees, but for their own future as well.
One of the European Union's highest officials, Donald Tusk, who's president of the European Council, is due to present draft proposals designed to persuade Britain to stay in the EU. Britain is seeking to renegotiate its membership of the Union. Chris Morris reports.
The draft legal text released today will form the basis for more than 2 weeks of intense diplomacy leading up to an EU summit later this month. The text will not include any suggestion of limits on the free movement of EU citizens, but there will be a proposal for an emergency break, allowing Britain to withhold in-work benefits from migrant workers for a period of up to 4 years. That is still likely to meet opposition, though, from countries in Eastern Europe. Senior EU officials know there will be obstacles, but they're confident that these proposals will eventually be accepted.
Representatives from 23 countries meet in Rome on Tuesday to review progress in countering the Islamic State group. The meeting will focus on efforts to regain territory from the jihadists in Syria and in Iraq. US officials say they'll also discuss how to stem the rise of IS in Libya. You're listening to the latest world news from the BBC. Negotiating teams from Syria's government and opposition groups are due to hold separate meetings with United Nations officials during a second day of talks in Switzerland. The attendance of opposition representatives at the peace talks had initially been in doubt. The BBC correspondent in Geneva says the fact that both sides are participating is being seen as positive, but the opposition has said that it will wait for the outcome of Tuesday's negotiations before confirming its formal participation. The trial has begun in Guatemala of 2 former military officers. They're accused of the sexual abuse and enslavement of women during the country's civil war. Prosecutors say the men allowed their troops to rape at least 15 women who disappeared in the 1980s. A study has found that cutting down trees in rainforests appears to be accelerating the spread of black rats. Here's our science correspondent, Matt McGrath.
While black rats have spread rapidly throughout the world over the past 400 years, they've tended to avoid mature forests, disliking the leafy floors which are noisy for these rodents to run through. Now researchers have found that the clearing of rainforests in the developing world could be speeding the spread of these black creatures. In tests in Borneo, scientists found that fallen trees contained more insects and provided better cover for these rats. The authors are concerned that this invasion will be bad news for other species, including nesting birds and small mammals.
And a former German football official is due to appear in court on Tuesday for calling Qatar's hosting of the World Cup in 2022 a cancerous growth on world football. The Qatar Football Association has filed a civil lawsuit for damages against Theo Zwanziger, who's a former president of the German Football Association. He insists his words were directed against FIFA's system of awarding the tournament to Qatar rather than the country. BBC News.